Now, I move at a trot towards the subject which, being East European, interests me most, and about which I intend to speak for a little bit longer, which is democracy and creative writing, publishers, the state, and censorship. It is so quaintly old-fashioned, this title, that it makes me feel back in 1974. So I enjoyed being back there and kind of engaging with that. The way and I deliberately said 74 rather than 84, that could have been a decade too. The reason I enjoyed this is simply thinking about censorship again, because I sort of got used to thinking that there is no censorship where I'm now, which it's obviously not true the moment you start thinking about it. The way I went about thinking about the question of censorship is in three parts, and very briefly I will address each of the three parts, the three questions that I asked myself. The first question is, what happens when the censor is your enemy? The second question is, what happens when the censor is your friend? And the third question is, what happens when the censor is yourself? What happens when the censor is your enemy? It is the most wonderful situation to be in. And growing up in Eastern Europe, I can vouchsafe for that, or Central Europe, however you want to define it, the Balkans. The equation between censorship being bad and yourself being good is a lovely one, and it enables you to chip away at censors with every available means at your disposal. And I remember my university lectures where my professor of Greek literature talked very pointedly about different literary genres and the way in which democracy in ancient Greece enabled different literary genres to flourish. So, to cut it short, to summarize it, he said that drama flourished in Greece, while it didn't flourish in the ancient Hebrew state or the ancient Egyptian state, because Greece was democratic and the Hebrew state and Egypt weren't. On the other hand, if the state wasn't democratic, it enabled poetry to flourish. Borges said that censorship is a mother of metaphor. And I remember my teacher saying that censorship is a mother of metaphor. So you have these dialogic, polyphonic genres, novel is one, which flourish in democracies, and you have the genres which according to my professor, flourish in democracy, in totalitarian states: poetry, periphrasis, allegory. Why did Romania have some of the best poets after the Second World War? Why did the classics thrive and flourish in Eastern Europe? Why were Romanian productions of Shakespeare better than anywhere else? Why did to say there is something rotten in the state of Denmark mean something on the stage in Bucharest it simply doesn't mean here? Why did we appropriate Shakespeare and we think we understand Shakespeare better than you do? These are some of the answers. This is what happens when censorship is bad. Also, you know your boundaries. Beaumarchais said, as long as I don't write about government, religion, and politics, I'm free to write anything. This is how I felt. And I was a very young editor, indeed the youngest in its history, of a literary review in Belgrade. And in 1984, this is a kind of moment of huge pride, so I'll tell you about that. I spent about 3 weeks of sleepless nights worrying as to whether I should or should not publish a line. And the line was, an aphorism, was some nations, I translated very badly, some nations are bad at poker. They get rid of the king and they take in the jack, the knave. The point of the joke was that the jack or the knave, that particular card in Serbo-Croat, which is my mother tongue, was gendarme, a policeman. So you get rid of the king and you take in the policeman. And for 3 weeks I couldn't sleep. I published, and then I couldn't sleep for another 3 or 4 weeks, waiting for, not for the knock, because this was Yugoslavia, no one's going to take me away anywhere, but just waiting for some friend of my father's to come around for a conversation. And we had that conversation, and I pretended that I didn't understand the metaphor. This is the beauty of the metaphor. Now, and I'm actually very proud of it. And that same year, this was in 1984, a white book was published by the then Ministry of Culture. We called this white book Les Fleurs du Mal. Les Fleurs du Mal contained collected anti-socialist publications, and even quoted from them, so it made wonderful reading, right? And I was in Les Fleurs du Mal, not as the author, but as the editor, but still a matter of some pride. However, what happens when the censor is your friend? What happens when the censor is your friend? There are two parts to this question. What happens when the censor is censoring the stuff you don't like? For example, when David Irving was arrested in Vienna, did you write to your local pen to try to get him out? The German and the Austrian pen, because of the laws in Germany, refused to act on his behalf. The British pen was willing to engage. But did you write? Did I write? No, I didn't. I don't like David Irving. I hate his ideas, so why should I write? But he was arrested, yes? What happens if I get the most wonderful contract for the novel I'm writing, let's say £500,000, and wouldn't it be lovely? And I find out in the catalogue that the person on the next page is Nick Griffin with his novel. He doesn't write novels, but why not? He might. And they may sell well. So what do? Do I write to my editor and say, I'm taking back the contract, here's the check back. I haven't spent any of the advance, so take it back. I don't want to share the catalogue. I don't want to appear in Hay and Y with Nick Griffin. What happens? It is a question, I have no answer. And yet it troubles me, because what happens with the censor is your friend is that most of what gets censored is the stuff of the right. What happens when a right-wing Dutch MP is not allowed to come into this country to speak? Do you say this is not fair? Do you stand up to protest? You don't. I know you don't, because I haven't seen you there. I don't. But what happens? Does this have any consequences? I think it's a serious question, because it is actually the right that gets censored more and more. And I don't particularly know what the answer to that is. So, that is, I only have a question. What happens when the censor is your friend? Another take on what happens when the censor is your friend is slightly different and perhaps more comfortable take, was presented here by Kutsi last year, when those of you who were at that lecture, was absolutely electrifying thing about the censorship of his novels in South Africa.